I get it. There's a lot of emotion on both sides, but as I keep saying, only one side frequently has Nazi flags showing up at their rallies. That's the Republican side, right? Whether it's Trump rallies or DeSantis rallies or Charlottesville.
Evan and I were in Germany a few years ago before the pandemic, and we were in a town square in Baden, and there was a guy waving a Confederate flag. And we couldn't understand why somebody in Germany would be waving a Confederate flag. So we asked someone, and they said, well, Nazi symbols are illegal here, so they use the Confederate flag.
Yep.
So, you tell me what shows up at these rallies.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. And and not to mention the Islamophobia they spout all the time, so if anybody is making everything worse about this latest Middle East crisis, it's them. So, by the way, I wanted to say, speaking of our Republican friends, we have Allison Gill coming up. She tweets, the Republican Israel funding plans, IRS cuts will add $12.5 billion to the deficit and has zero funding for Ukraine. As I said, it's a $12.5 billion gift to their rich friends and Putin. Here we go, right in there. Mike, what's his name? Speaker God Warrior, Mike Johnson.
Yes.
Is like, trying to explain away. That's why they didn't want it CBO scored, right? Because everything they propose is a disaster.
No, it's all a Trojan horse with something, designed to please their far right base. They won't ever bring something forward that is just a clean vote for their members to vote on.
Yeah. So and we were talking about these well, you were there at DC Sexy Liberal, just Jamie Raskin having, it's something we were saying we don't recognize as principle,
right,
is him not voting to expel Santos because of, I'm a constitutional guy and he hasn't been convicted yet. It just, boy, you don't see that on the Republican side very much, do you?
No, and look, I'm not going to pretend to know what members of Congress talk about with each other, but if anybody deserved expulsion,
yeah, right, yes,
his time will come.
Yeah,
right.
And meanwhile, they try to censure Rashida Tlaib for what? Having a Palestinian flag and saying there should be a ceasefire in Gaza. I mean,
as far as Santos is concerned, he's not going to be reelected. He's not probably not going to be renominated by the party. And he's facing, how many counts are we up to at this point?
Yeah.
11 billion.
11 billion. The
11
official
billion.
mathematician of the Stephanie Miller Show, Chris Boy.
Whatever people may have gotten from him being removed from office, whatever, schadenfreude they might have gotten from that, it'll come soon enough.
Yeah. Speaking of Speaker God Warrior, I know you've heard this, Carl, but John Cooper tweets, Mike Johnson closely collaborated with a group called Exodus International that promoted conversion therapy, a discredited practice that asserted it could change the sexual orientation of gay and lesbian individuals. Exodus shut down in 2013 with its founder posting an apology. So it's not just his wife yeah, go ahead.
Not just an apology. The founders of Exodus International apologized and came out of the closet again.
I was going to say, and ran off together.
This does not work. And it's not just a discredited practice, it's a dangerous practice, right? People lost their lives, killed themselves because of this work. And that's ultimately what this is all about. The opposition to LGBTQ people on the far right is about denying their existence and telling them that they don't have to be who they are.
Yeah.
That is extremely unhealthy. There is not a medical association who supports such treatment. And it's not surprising. I mean, I believe that his family even supported counseling services along those lines. And then when he became speaker, the website disappeared from the internet. So, this is what you get when you're a fifth string pick for the Republican caucus.
Yeah. Who apparently doesn't have a bank account, which is not at all suspicious in any way. Carl, it's interesting when we talk about that, when we're talking about reparative therapy. I don't know, like, are leeches next? I just think, like, between, this anti-vaxxer stuff we just opened the show talking about, I can't imagine being on the school board. Like, you just think, oh my God, do we have to, like, teach all of this stuff again, basic science. And, I was looking at a picture of, everybody lined up for their sugar cube, when we had polio. And, the anti-vaxxers now would go, oh, look at the sheeple all lining up. It's like, well, right, and guess what they are? They're alive sheeple. They're alive, and they don't have polio because we eradicated it because of the vaccine.
Fortunately, I live in a place where science is respected, and and that people trust medical doctors to help inform these decisions. But I can't imagine being in a place where not only are they, people are like, oh, it's COVID vaccine denial. It's like, well, for a lot of these people, it's not even just COVID vaccine denial. It's denying every vaccine. And so you're seeing vaccination rates among children drop. And, obviously those things, vaccines require broad usage in order to be effective. And they're putting people in danger.
Yeah. But I mean, that's, we're talking about a Speaker of the House that believes in discredited, quote unquote, science of, reparative therapy. Bella's Mike tweeted, every day we learn more things about maggot Mike Johnson that turn my stomach. Nobody voted to put the American Taliban 2 heartbeats from the presidency outside of House Republicans, yet there he is. I hope someone puts in a motion to vacate after the government is funded. I mean, that is what it feels like, whether you want to make Handmaid's Tale or American Taliban, but he is really, really extreme.
Well, in fairness, I don't think he's read the Handmaid's Tale or seen the movie because, television has a liberal bias and the books have been burned in his house. So I don't think he's aware of it. You might think he's creating the plot from scratch.
Yeah.
Someone said if Steve Scalise is David Duke without the baggage, Mike Johnson is Handmaid's Tale without the Hulu fees. But this is, I guess, the best they have to offer on the Republican side for leader, for speaker.
I wouldn't even call it the best they have. This is what they have to offer.
Right.
There is no best at this point in that caucus. And, he's such a bad guy that this is exactly what he deserves, being speaker of that conference, because it is a cursed position, as we all know. No one of any reputable note has served as the Republican Speaker of the House.
Yeah.
The longest serving Republican Speaker of the House then went on to serve a prison sentence.
Yes.
And so in the last 50 years. And so, look, he is a temporary steward of that position because he's not going to last long.
Yeah, let's make him super temporary, shall we? So I was going to say, thank you, Ruthie. Ruthie on Twitter said, your logic sentiment about this tragic war is spot on. It's the rare people that like us, Chris. Because, by the way, you got hate mail too yesterday.
Oh, I'm sure I did.
Yeah. So did I. It's okay. Our hearts hurt for those slaughtered on 10/7. Our hearts hurt for the suffering in Gaza, and the faces of the children fleeing from Ukraine remain chilling. There has to be a moral consistency, right, Carl? I mean, that's why, these issues, speaking of the Republicans, they just want to divide on every issue. Let's give money to Israel and not Ukraine. Let's, it's every single issue. And we can't stand, as Joe Biden has said, for democracy in the world against terrorism, whether it's Putin committing it, right, in Ukraine or in any of our allies. I mean, what is your take on all this? Because it does feel like, particularly, as you sit on the Board of Education, colleges, a lot of people are going like, what is going on with colleges? That there's like anti-Semitism and, Islamophobia in places where you would not expect to find it. But this Gaza thing has really brought up a ton of vitriol in our country. What do you make of it?
Well, I think the vitriol has existed. You look at the situation with Republicans in Ukraine, and this is one of the things that's unfortunate here is that Republicans they will always use whatever it takes to get their way, right? And so they have been looking for a way to stop funding Ukraine for quite a while now. And so to see them using this crisis is just, beyond the pale.
Yeah.
But completely expected from them, right? This is a speaker who has been on the books saying that we shouldn't be funding the resistance in Ukraine. End of the day, I think we've got to be diligent about holding the majority in Congress accountable for the policies that they're setting that seem to, be, wherever the political winds might be moving, or wherever they think they can get the winds to move.
Yeah.
They're not going to be consistent. They're not going to be thoughtful about American interests. And if Donald Trump says jump, they'll say how high, and do whatever it takes to appease him.
Yeah. Um, Carl, your election is coming up Tuesday, so we are pedal to the metal time, as you say. If you're not exhausted on election day, you haven't done enough. What are the issues would you say that you deal with most that people are going to vote on Tuesday in Virginia about, whether it's school board or elsewhere?
There was an NBC news story, national news story about our school board campaign yesterday, and I went door knocking, and I go door knocking very frequently. And I went with a reporter who observed me talking to dozens of voters, and they wanted to talk about bus schedules, making sure teachers are paid better. How are we helping to close achievement gaps? What are we doing to make sure that we don't have a teacher shortage? All the things you would expect people to think about when they think about public education. Not a single person asked me to discriminate against trans kids. Not a single person asked me to burn some books.
Yeah.
So these boogeymen from the right are not materializing at the doors when I talk to voters. But I would say the top issues are making sure that we keep our schools safe and inclusive,
Yeah.
including preventing gun violence, making sure that we continue to provide academic services to help close learning gaps from the pandemic, that we invest in mental health supports for students and staff, that we pay teachers better. And,
Yeah.
these are basic issues that people care about when they think about schools. This national political conversation is more about Republicans trying to turn out their base than it is about helping anybody in a school.
Yeah. One of the posters I've always loved, whether it's, kids of different races or, now Palestinian, Israeli kids, but just they don't hate until we teach them to. And that's why it's so critical what you do. And we thank you because people got to pay attention all the time. Virginia, you vote on Tuesday. It's just not on, every 4 years. You got to turn out on every level.